Hey guys, I want to make a short video today about how I personally overclock an NVIDIA GPU. This isn't going to be, some very comprehensive guide going over all the advanced topics, but instead it's just going to be a short tutorial on how I personally do it, which should be enough to get a lot of people started. First off, this works across any NVIDIA GPU that's came out recently, so 7 series, or 70 series, 90 series, 10 series, doesn't matter. Anything that's came out recently, this should be able to be applied to. So you're going to need two things to do this. Number one, you're going to need a benchmarking program. So currently I'm using Heaven Benchmark, which will be good for doing benchmarking, obviously, and then also for stressing the GPU while you're doing your overclocking. The second thing you're going to need is overclocking software. Personally, I'm using EVGA Precision. I like it the best. There's some other options out there, but both of these programs I will provide links in the descriptions where you can download. They're both free, and they both work well. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to open up the benchmarking program in the background, set it on a loop. What this is going to do is it's going to allow you, when you make changes to your GPU, it's going to allow you to effectively see them real time happen. Anything like issues you might have from overclocking, like artifacts, crashes, stuttering, stuff like that, you'll be able to see immediately, and you'll know that you're kind of hitting the limit of your overclock. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up that benchmarking program, set it on a loop, which I've already done, and then I'm going to go into EVGA Precision, and the first thing I'm going to focus on is the power target. So power target is effectively how much wattage can your GPU pull from the wall. So 100% means it can pull up to what it's rated at, or what the default setting is. As you change that, you can increase or decrease. The nice thing about increasing is effectively you need more wattage or more power in order to achieve an overclock to allow your card to run faster. So by setting yourself up here at 110%, which is the max my card can do, all cards can do a little bit different depending on what the BIOS is set to and stuff. So for the card that I personally have, 110 is the max that I can go. So by setting that, though, that means I can pull 110% of whatever the rated wattage for the card is. So make sure you have a power supply that can handle that increase. But the nice thing about this is it's going to allow me to get effectively a little bit more performance out of the card when I get to the overclocking step. The second thing I'm going to focus on is this GPU target. So first thing I did was I unlinked these two just so that way I can move them independently. But the cool thing about this is EVGA Precision and other programs allow you to set a temperature target, which means anytime my graphics card is getting towards that temperature target, start underclocking, okay? So let's say you overclocked it 100 megahertz over. Well, maybe you end up getting close to that 85C that I have set here. What the program's going to do is it's going to start underclocking it until it can maintain that temperature. So for me personally, 85C is usually a safe temperature to hit. I'm currently water cooling this card, so it shouldn't get nowhere near that 85 probably, but nonetheless, that's a good temperature to set even if I was air cooling. Feel free though, if you want to go higher, you can go higher. My card can be set personally up to 91C. Just remember, the higher temperature that you're okay with is going to translate into a higher overclock most likely. So anyways, I'm going to set mine to 85. I'm going to hit apply. And now those things have been applied to my card in real time here. So the second thing I'm going to look at is voltage. So NVIDIA GPUs usually allow you to overvolt at least some, but usually not very much. In this case, I can only go, 87 microvolts or millivolts? I don't know, not very much. So the nice thing about this, though, is I've seen it, this tiny little bit, actually allow for a greater achieved stability. So I recommend bumping it up if you have the temperature to deal with. So I think bumping that up will raise me, let's see, what did it do? Raise me up, say maybe 1 or 2 degrees. So if you have 1 or 2 degrees to deal with, you might be able to get a little bit more stability, so by bumping that up. But first thing I always do is I come in, boom, power target all the way up, voltage all the way up, set my temp target at like 85. So some people can come in and you can just set that, leave it, not touch it, and be happy with it. Especially if you have a 10 series card with GPU Boost 3.0, what that's going to do by setting your power target up and your voltage, that's going to allow for the GPU to self overclock itself up to a higher number than what it's rated for. Just because you're effectively allowing it to pull more power automatically. But for my intents and purposes right now, I'm going to come in and I'm going to do a manual overclock. So there's two things that you can overclock on this GPU. You have the clock offset and the memory clock offset. The GPU clock, so that's the core, and the memory clock offset. The core, the GPU clock, that is going to have the most impact on actual performance. So the way I kind of do it is I come in, I focus on that first, and then I go to the memory clock and then start bumping that up. it's kind of a give and take a little bit. Sometimes maybe you can get stable with, let's say, 100 megahertz on the core clock, with 100 megahertz on the memory clock, but then you can maybe get 125 on the core clock if you kept the memory clock at 0. So for me, I always want to make sure I maximize the GPU core clock, since on NVIDIA GPUs, that's kind of the most important thing, or the thing that translates most into performance. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to set something kind of safe. So like 50 megahertz. So you can see I hit apply. You can see my megahertz that the program is reporting right here has gone up by 50. You can also see in the program as well, it's done that. So the fact that I'm not getting any crashes, I'm not getting any artifacting, I'm getting nothing in the program back here, that means that that 50 megahertz is looking pretty stable. So what I'll keep doing here is I'll keep bumping that up, set it, let it sit for a little while. Usually I let it sit for about 30 seconds or so before I would bump it up again. But I already know that this graphics card can overclock to 150 on the GPU, so I'll sit there and bump that in and then say that it's good. So again, like I said, put something in there, let it sit for a little bit, see where it's going to go. So as you start increasing that, you might get problems, might run into problems where it's either crashing or you see artifacts, and if you do, you just know, okay, now I need to bump it back. You will get it every once in a while. If you push it too far, you might have to do a full restart in order to be able to get kind of back in this situation where things are going good. But anyways, I know 150 works for me, so I'm going to leave that. So then, now that I got the GPU core clock in, then I'm going to come down to the memory clock offset. I'm going to set a number, do that same process. So again, I know that this can do 400 megahertz on the memory clock, so I'll dial that in, hit apply. And now at this point, I feel pretty confident about my numbers here. I think they're pretty safe. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to come in and let this run for a while. Okay, maybe let it loop in here for 10-20 minutes. Also possibly let's run a benchmark. Some of the things that's nice to do is as you're upgrading this, so run the benchmark once stock, record what that score is, and then run the benchmark again once you have your overclock, just to make sure the numbers are actually going up as you would expect. There is a rare case where sometimes you might see, like it might say that your clock is higher, but when you actually run a benchmark, your score is not higher. So there's every once in a while that can happen. Usually that just means you're pushing it too far. But anyways, so now that, like, let's say, I ran the benchmark, I let it stress test for, 20-30 minutes, everything felt good. That's not the end of it for me personally. What I do is I call that good, but then I'll open up some more benchmarking programs. I'll usually go and play some of the games that I like to play. So maybe I'll go play some Overwatch and some Public Unknown's Battlegrounds. Things that I know, GTA 5, things I know that stress the GPU. Because a lot of the times, different programs and different games might stress the GPU a little bit differently. Like some might require a memory clock more. Other ones might be core clock more. Some might somehow magically pull more power. Like there's a lot of weird things on different programs. So it's good to test across a variety of applications. But at that point, I mean, you're pretty much set. So the nice thing about Precision is you can actually set it these different profiles down here. So right now this is already set for me to a profile. You can also set so that way it starts up on Windows. So for me, I start my machine, Precision automatically starts up, automatically applies my profile 1 in here, and then I don't have any issues. So yeah, so that's pretty much my process. Like I said, that's not like a complete overview of how to overclock a GPU, but if you follow those things, so setting your power target, setting your temp target, setting your voltage, setting your GPU clock offset and your memory clock offset, if you go through all of those things, that should, as I run into the microphone, that should give you a good kind of basis to get started. So there's one more thing I forgot to mention. So since I'm running a water-cooled GPU, I personally don't have to do this. But if you're running an air-cooled GPU, it's good to come in here and set a manual fan curve, okay? What that's going to do is that's going to allow you to specify how loud or how fast you want your fans to spin at certain temperatures. So the good thing about this is if you're going for the best overclock you can, you don't care about temperatures, I'd come in, whatever your temp target is here, so if it's 85, go to 85, set it to 100%. and then have it like, some type of curve going up to that. You can also set it to, there's some built in, so there's usually like an aggressive, a silent, stuff like that built in. But the key is to help you get your temperatures, manageable, especially when you're overclocking and increasing the heat. It's good to go in and set like a manual fan curve to help with that. So yeah, so I think that's it. Hopefully this answered some of your questions.